middle decades of the 16th century appear, in retrospect, to have been an especially eventful period in the long and perplexing history of unexplained aerial phenomena. A little more than a year after the celebrated celestial disturbance reported over Nuremberg, another remarkable episode was said to have unfolded far from Europe, in Dinghai County of Zhejiang Province, China. On the evening of July 24, 1562, shortly after the sun had fallen below the horizon, villagers looked toward the northwestern sky and saw something extraordinary descending from above. According to the witnesses, the object resembled a du, the familiar grain-measuring vessel of traditional Chinese life. It was described as having a pointed top, a rounded underside marked in yellow and white, and a maroon-colored bracket projecting from one side. Those who saw it said that it plunged downward with startling speed, enveloped in flames, as though the sky itself had opened to release a burning sign. Its brilliance was so intense that observers later claimed they could see even the fine hairs upon their skin in its glare. Yet just as the object seemed about to strike the earth, it abruptly changed course. It rose again into the air, then moved up and down several times, casting shifting shadows and filling the scene with an eerie, unsteady light. The surviving account, available in a Western language, does not explain what became of it after that moment, and so the episode ends in uncertainty. What is clear, however, is that the phenomenon was not confined to a single village or a handful of startled onlookers. It was reportedly seen across a region stretching more than 500 miles, and testimony concerning the event was gathered by officials of the Imperial Chinese government and forwarded to the bureau responsible for recording omens, portents, and other strange occurrences. The Dinghai report was not an isolated curiosity. As it suggests, the historical record of China is extraordinarily rich in accounts of mysterious things seen in the heavens. One compilation alone lists no fewer than 741 reports of unexplained aerial phenomena between 139 BC and 1918 AD, a span of more than 2 millennia. Much of this material remains little known outside China. Only a small portion has been carefully studied by Western researchers, and even less has been translated into Western languages. Yet these records, preserved through dynastic histories, local gazetteers, and official memorials, may prove invaluable. If the vast body of Chinese testimony is ever systematically compared with the better-known accounts from Europe and other parts of the world, it may illuminate not only the cultural history of such sightings, but also the deeper and more elusive history of the phenomena themselves. On the night of October 11, 1973, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing by the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. It was around 9 o'clock p.m., and the weather was calm, which made it seem like a normal and peaceful night. The two men were sitting on a pier on the west side of the river, with their fishing lines in the water, when they suddenly heard a strange whirring sound behind them. When they turned around, they saw something shocking. There was a glowing object shaped like an egg hovering above the ground, about 30 feet away. The object looked very unusual, and they estimated that it was about 30 to 40 feet wide and around 8 to 10 feet tall. They also said it gave off a blue glow on the side facing them, which made the whole moment feel even more strange and frightening. As Hickson and Parker stared at the object, a door opened on its side and 3 strange creatures came out. In their description, the beings were about 5 feet tall and looked unlike anything human. They said the creatures had bullet-shaped heads, no necks, slit-like mouths, and pointed features where their eyes and ears should have been. Their skin was gray and wrinkled, and they had round feet with hands that looked like claws. What made the experience even more terrifying was that the men felt completely helpless. They said they could not move or speak while the creatures floated toward them through the air. Parker was so overwhelmed with fear that he fainted, but Hickson stayed conscious. According to Hickson, both men were taken inside the object into a bright room, where they were examined as if someone or something was studying them. After that, they were brought back to the riverbank, confused, terrified, and trying to understand what had just happened. After the experience, both men were badly shaken and did not know what to do next. They contacted the local Air Force base, but they were told to report the incident to the sheriff instead. At first, the sheriff did not believe their story because it sounded too unusual to be true. Even so, Hickson and Parker continued to tell the same version of events and did not change important details. They were even placed in a room where they thought they were alone, but their conversation was secretly recorded, and they still sounded scared and sincere. Later, both men also passed polygraph tests, which caused more people to take their claims seriously. Because of the consistency of their story and the amount of attention the case received, the Pascagoula incident is often described as one of the most well-known and best-documented UFO abduction stories in history. Ancient Romans, like people in every age, looked to the sky with a mixture of wonder, fear, and curiosity. Long before modern technology gave rise to airplanes, satellites, and discussions of unidentified flying objects, Roman writers were already recording strange and unexplained sights above their cities and battlefields. Their accounts describe aerial phenomena so unusual that, even now, they feel strikingly familiar. Historians and scholars wrote of objects appearing over towns in Italy that resembled round shields or metallic discs moving through the air. One of the most well-known examples comes from the historian Livy, who described sightings over Arpi in 216 BC using the word klypai. In Roman language, the term referred to round bronze shields, yet to a modern reader, it can also suggest something disc-shaped gliding across the sky. These were not isolated remarks buried in a single source. Other Roman writers, including Julius Obsequens, preserved additional reports of extraordinary things seen overhead. Some accounts speak of shield-like forms moving across the heavens, while others describe objects that seemed almost alive in their motion, crossing the sky or even appearing to clash with one another. The Romans also told of mysterious lights that defied ordinary expectation. At times, these lights were said to blaze at night with a brilliance like the sun. In other reports, they began as small glowing sparks before changing in size and form. One especially dramatic account tells of an object descending from the darkness like a spark, swelling until it appeared as large as the moon, and then rising again in the shape of a torch. There were even reports of bright, star-like lights visible in broad daylight over Rome, events strange enough to stand out in a society deeply attentive to signs in the heavens. What makes these accounts especially compelling is not only the imagery they contain, but the way the Romans understood them. To Roman observers, strange aerial events were not scientific puzzles waiting to be solved through physics or astronomy. They were omens, warnings, or messages from the gods, woven into a worldview in which the heavens reflected divine will. That response reveals something important about history. People do not merely see unusual events, they interpret them through the beliefs and assumptions of their own time. The Romans viewed the unknown through religion and ritual, just as modern societies often view it through science, technology, or speculation about worlds beyond our own. In that sense, these ancient reports are more than curious stories from the past. They remind us that mystery in the sky has always captured human attention, and that every civilization, ancient or modern, tries to give meaning to what it cannot easily explain. Although many of the well-known flying saucer reports from the late 1940s and early 1950s took place in the United States, a new wave of unusual sightings spread across Europe in 1954. Among the most remarkable of these cases was the account given by Marius Dulder, a railroad worker who lived in Quarouble, France. On the night of September 10, 1954, at about 10:30 p.m., Dulder was at home when he suddenly heard his dog barking wildly outside. As the barking continued and seemed increasingly urgent, he grabbed a flashlight and stepped out to see what had caused such an intense reaction. When Dulder looked toward the railroad tracks beside his house, he saw an unfamiliar object resting there only about 20 feet away. Before he could make sense of what he was seeing, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. Turning around, he was startled to see two small human-like figures, each about 3 feet tall, moving toward him. Almost immediately, a beam of light shot out from the object on the tracks and froze him in place, leaving him unable to move. The two strange beings passed by him, reached the object, and climbed inside through a hatch. Moments later, the object rose into the air and sped away, reportedly shifting colors as it disappeared. As soon as it was gone, Dulder regained control of his body and quickly contacted the police to report what had happened. Investigators who examined the scene that night and again the following day reported several unusual physical effects that seemed difficult to explain. Dulder's flashlight no longer worked, and his battery-powered telephone had also stopped functioning. In addition, the gravel beneath the railroad tracks, where the object was said to have landed, appeared to be both compressed and carbonized across an area nearly 20 feet wide. Dulder also reported a disturbing physical reaction of his own. Whenever he tried to go near the exact spot where the object had been, he became suddenly ill. These details added to the mystery of the encounter and helped make the Quarouble incident one of the most discussed European UFO cases of the 1950s.